Okay, Psalm 35, a Psalm of David. Plead my cause, O Lord, with those who strive with me. Fight against them that fight against me. The enemies of the Lord were the enemies of David. Same thing for you. If you live for the Lord, you've got an enemy. And it's not nice to think about enemies, but you've got them, because there is the enemy of our souls, the enemy of God, Satan and his forces. They oppose God and they oppose the people of God, and no matter what, they're going to oppose you if you are living for the Lord. Okay, so it's important to keep short accounts with God, to stay close to Him and have the armor of God in place, and to take the spiritual warfare seriously. Okay, verse 2, take hold of shield and buckler and stand up to help me. So the Lord is our shield. David is asking the Lord to be his shield in a sense, but the Lord is our shield, Psalm 28:7. And we need the shield of faith, Ephesians chapter 6. Okay, verse 3, draw out also the spear and block the way against them that persecute me. Say unto my soul, I am your salvation. So David is asking for encouragement. He's asking the Lord to encourage him, strengthen him, and so can we. We need to pray to the Lord. Just continue to seek His face, approach His throne of grace, Hebrews 4:16, and strengthen yourself in Him, because we need encouragement from the Lord if we're going to endure or succeed through this spiritual warfare. David is talking about salvation here. Say unto my soul, I am your salvation. That's not eternal salvation. David already had that. He already had a relationship with the Lord by faith, but he's talking about deliverance from his problems, from his current circumstances. And then verse 4, let them that be confounded and put to shame that seek after my soul, let them be turned back and brought to confusion that devise my hurt. Okay, the enemies of God were David's enemies, and we have enemies. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2. We need to take that seriously, and it helps us to have a sober perspective on life, and to not to let our guard down too much. We have to keep in mind what is important in life, what our goals in life really are. Okay, so verse 5, let them be as chaff before the wind, and let the angel of the Lord chase them. We need help from angels. It's okay to pray for angels to intervene. I do that sometimes when I think of my kids. If my kids are driving somewhere, let's say your daughter or something is driving from one city to another, it's okay to pray for angels to protect along the way. But I've heard they only go the speed limit, so tell your kids, you stay under the speed limit. Okay, verse 7, for without cause they have hid their net for me in a pit, which they have dug for my soul without cause. So without cause, is kind of a repeated phrase in this psalm. And the point is clear that David didn't provoke this opposition, but the enemy also lays traps for people. It's one of the ways the Lord fights against God and the people of God, is he puts out these snares, these nets to try to entangle people. We need to lay aside the sin that so easily entangles us, Hebrews 12, and run with perseverance the race marked out for us. 8, let destruction come upon them by surprise, and let the net which they have hid entangle them. Into that very destruction let them fall. So he's praying that the plans of the enemy would be turned against them, against the enemy. When Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan," he wasn't calling Peter Satan so much as recognizing the enemy at work in Peter. And sometimes we can recognize the work of the enemy, and we can look at a person and realize that they're really not the enemy, even if the enemy is working through them. So we can hate the sin but love the sinner. Okay, so verse 9, "And my soul shall rejoice in the Lord, it shall rejoice in his salvation. Bring the sacrifice of praise, rejoice in the Lord." Joy is a fruit of the Spirit. If you don't have it, you need to get filled with the Spirit. Ephesians 4:18. I'm at 5:18, and be filled with the Spirit. Verse 10, "All my bones shall say, Lord, who is like you, who delivers the poor from them that are too strong for him, yea, the poor and the needy from those that steal from him." Okay, bones, David's whole body got involved in this prayer. Pray with your whole person. David considers himself poor and needy. And when we recognize our poverty, our spiritual poverty, it helps us to trust in the Lord. We realize we can't do it, and we need, if the Lord doesn't do it, it's not going to happen. We need help from God. So it helps us when we realize this, to call upon his name and to trust in him. Verse 11, false witnesses did rise up. They laid to my charge things that I knew not. So false witnesses, the devil's a liar, John 8:44. It's the father of lies. He's continuously lying, and he's going to assault the people of God with things that are not true. But also, God hates lying. We don't want to be participating in the devil's work. We need to be people of truth. You talk about false witnesses, there are examples of that, plenty if you look around in the world today. But how about Hamas, the enemies of Israel? A lot of times they're not telling the truth. And when you see someone who is not telling the truth, not just them, not just to pick on them, but there are groups that are kind of famous for falsehood. And when you see that, that's the enemy at work. Then verse 12, "They rewarded me evil for good, bereaving my soul." It's hard. The pain is real. God knows that. The Lord knows that. And he gives us encouragement and comfort, the comfort and reassurance of his presence and his Spirit at work in our lives, and then the knowledge that the things, the circumstances that are developing in our lives are eventually going to work out to good, even for us. He works all things together for good to those who love him. Romans 8:28. Verse 13, excuse me, "But as for me, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled my soul with fasting, and my prayer returned into mine own bosom." David cared about these people, even though they were his enemies, even though they opposed him and lied about him, were dishonest. David nevertheless had a genuine concern for their welfare, and so can we. We have enemies. We have to recognize they're not the real enemy. The enemy has them deceived and maybe ensnared and is working through them, but they're not the real enemy, and we're concerned about people. We hope for their deliverance. We pray for their well-being and their eventual salvation. Then verse 14, "I behaved myself as though he had been my friend or a brother. I bowed down heavily as one that mourns for his mother." Yeah, we don't wish ill upon others. And we have to keep in mind that even for the worst people, we just have to remember that this is the only heaven they will ever see. If they don't get saved, this is it for them. And it helps us when we think like that to have compassion on people. Verse 15, but in my adversity they rejoiced. So in contrast to David's genuine concern, the enemies, all they wanted was David's hurt, and demise. But in my adversity they rejoiced and gathered themselves together. Yea, the attackers gathered themselves together against me, and I knew it not. They tore at me without ceasing. They figuratively, with their speech and their attitude, they were tearing at him. And the enemy doesn't take a day off. Even when you feel bad, you might take a sick day and the enemy doesn't. You have to keep that in mind. And the enemy is famous for attacking people when they're vulnerable. And when you feel weak, when you feel vulnerable, that's the time to press into God. It's time to pray to the Lord, and don't stop till you're there in His presence at the throne of grace. Verse 16, with hypocritical mockers in feasts, they gnash their teeth at me. To gnash your teeth at someone, that's a figurative expression. It means, you're grinding your teeth looking at someone. It's a way of saying they have this strife, this inner turmoil that they're expressing toward a person or a situation. So this is what they're doing. The enemy, David's enemies, they're all uptight. They're all have this tension, this inner turmoil regarding David. And David doesn't have that kind of animosity toward them, but they really hate David. That's the idea. And then verse 17, Lord, how long will you look on? Rescue my soul from their destructions, my precious life from the lions. David's praying for physical deliverance. And it may look like the Lord is only observing, not getting involved, but He cares. God cares. The Lord cares about every detail, about every hurt that you endure and what you're suffering. We can cast our cares upon Him because He cares for us. 1 Peter 5:7. I will give you thanks in the great congregation. I will praise you among many people. David's prayer and his praise were public, and ours should be as well. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. The story about the 10 lepers that were healed, and one of those lepers came back to thank Jesus. We want to be like that one, not the other 9, but we want to be like that one that remembers to give thanks to God. If something good happens to you, especially if He gets you out of something, delivers you, remember to give thanks. Remember to give Him thanks and praise, and publicly, really, I might add. David's praise was public in the great congregation. Then verse 19, let not them rejoice over me who are wrongfully my enemies, neither let them wink with the eye who hate me without cause. The enemy loves to insult. Can't argue with the substance of your cause, so will resort to ad hominem attacks, and you have to just know that is one of the battle strategies of the enemy, and that's how he works. He's going to assault you. You don't deserve it. It's not your fault. You just have to endure it by the armor of God, the work of the Spirit in and through you that will give you defenses and thick skin. Verse 20, for they speak not peace, but they devise deceitful matters against them that are quiet in the land. They talk about fake news. The enemy is famous for fake news. They make up stories and speak lies. Verse 21, yea, they open their mouth wide against me. Yea, they open their mouths wide against me and say, aha, aha, our eyes have seen it. So they have these false accusations, accusing. David accusing God's people. Satan is called the accuser of the brethren. This you have seen, O Lord. Keep not silent. O Lord, be not far from me. The enemy claims to have seen something, but really the Lord is the one who sees. The Lord knows, and David knows that the Lord has truly seen. And also, we just need to remember that the Lord can rebuke our enemies in ways that we never could. And it's it's a mistake to try to fight these kind of battles in the flesh. You fight these kind of battles on your knees. You come to the Lord and you cry out to him, and he will defend you. This you have seen, O Lord. That's verse 22. Then verse 23, stir up yourself and awake to my defense, even unto my cause, my God and my Lord. So Lord is Adonai, same as verse 22. And here David says, my God. David has this personal, it's not just God, it's my God. He has this personal relationship with the Lord. He loves the Lord, and it's for him, this is what it's about. It's this relationship that he has. Do you have that? Do you turn to the Lord as one turns to a friend, but not, I'm not talking about a peer. I'm just talking about someone who is close enough that you have this knowledge that he really does care and he really is listening. Well, that kind of relationship is developed in the times when you're not being attacked. I mean, usually, in the times when it doesn't really matter so much, but those are the times when you press into the Lord and you seek his face, you read his word, you meditate on his word, you seek to know him in the times of peace. And then when the hard times come, you already have that relationship and that confidence in the Lord. Judge me, O Lord my God, according to your righteousness, and let them not rejoice over me. If there's anything wrong with us, it's a blessing if the Lord brings that to our attention so that we can deal with it. We can, mature past that point. Verse 25, let them not say in their hearts, this is how we would have it. Let them not say, we have swallowed him up. The enemy would swallow us up. The thief comes only to kill, steal, and destroy, John 10:10. And the enemy's not your friend. Don't try to make peace with the enemy. Never capitulate. Don't think if you give in a little bit, maybe he won't be so harsh. Now, the enemy is out to destroy you and your family and your children. Do not compromise. Stay strong in the Lord and fight back with the power of the Spirit, the power that the Lord gives you in the Spirit. There's a war going on. We need to keep that in mind. Verse 26, let them be ashamed and brought to confusion together who rejoice at my hurt. Let them be clothed with shame and dishonor who magnify themselves against me. So we can pray for our enemies to be ashamed. It's not a prayer out of bounds, and we won't be disappointed for trusting in the Lord. The more you trust in the Lord, the more you will appreciate it. The more you will be glad that you did. It's dishonorable to attack someone unjustly like this. Let them be clothed with dishonor when their actions and attitudes are revealed for what they are. It's going to be dishonor upon them, and the Lord can reveal people for who they are in a way that we couldn't. And we need to give this to the Lord and allow him to fight, not get in the way of the Lord bringing our deliverance. And the Lord says in Romans chapter 12 that we're not to repay evil for evil, but leave room for the Lord to work. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Okay, verse 27, let them shout for joy and be glad, who favor my righteous cause. May they say continually, let the Lord be magnified, who delights in the prosperity of his servants. So here again we see public praise on the part of David. David describes himself as his servant. He's the servant, the Lord's servant, like the royal servant. That's actually the title of the next psalm, Psalm 36. Then verse 28, and my tongue shall speak of your righteousness and of your praise all day long. Tell people that the Lord is righteous. Everything he does is right. And, some people, the enemy or the people who don't know God, they're going to blame him for everything. They won't give him credit for anything, but they'll blame him for everything. And it's the people of God who are going to give to the Lord thanks and praise. We need to be the ones who do this publicly. As a reflection of our relationship with the Lord, and not just because you feel like it. Sometimes it might be a little uncomfortable in a public setting, but do it anyway. Bring to the Lord the sacrifice of praise. Do it as an act of worship to him. See the reward you get. Hebrews 13:15.